I'm a medical school professor at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx and
Mhm.
at Montefiore Hospital, which is the companion hospital with that medical school.
Mhm.
Um, I'd say that my interest in aging and dementia developed in some ways relatively late in my career. I'm a psychiatrist and I had always practiced in bioethics. But when my mother developed dementia, that's the sort of thing that really draws your attention to a problem. And I was really struck by how difficult it was. I'm one of six siblings in my family, and we're all educated. And, um, it was still, even though we're in some ways very lucky, it was still really difficult for us to figure out what my mother's experience was, what she needed now to be able to predict what she might need in the future, and then figure out where in our community we could find those resources. So I just felt it shouldn't be this hard. I would love to write something. I mean, it's not really a how-to book, but something that reflected some of the things that I had learned about thinking about dementia. And because it was our mother with dementia, I think my siblings and I were all worried about ourselves developing dementia and what we should do and think about that. So I wanted to address people who found themselves in similar circumstances.
Mhm. So, what's the main point of your book, Dementia Reimagined?
It's always so hard with your own work to figure out, well, how do you answer such a good question? But if I had to pick one point, I think I'd say what I would really love people to take away is that dementia is a bad disease. It is ultimately fatal. But excuse me, we as a society, really kind of globally, actually do a lot that makes dementia worse. There's so much bias and so many policies that are not helpful or that have a lot of bureaucracy involved. But also on a personal level, a young colleague told me a while ago that her mother had developed dementia, and her mother and father had old friends that they'd known for decades who lived right next door. And for years, on once a week, they would go out, and when the weather was nice in their backyard, they'd sort of, go through the gate and the fence and have dinner together. And when they told that couple that the mother had dementia, that couple basically stopped being their friends. I don't think they were bad people, but maybe they were frightened. I mean, I'm sure they knew dementia's not catching, but it was so hurtful. So the dementia itself was difficult enough, but this had nothing to do with the biologic disease. This is friends kind of being frightened, not knowing how to behave around you, and instead of offering support, withdrawing in a way. So I think there are a lot of challenges. It would be great if somebody came up with a fabulous biological cure for dementia, and good people are working on that. But there's a lot more that we regular people can do to make dementia better for the people that have it and for their family members. So that I'd say would be the main takeaway from the book. Yeah, I think, and discrimination in the sense of it certainly would be very difficult to get a job if somebody knew you had dementia. And there's some jobs you probably shouldn't do as you have developing cognitive impairment. That's a real issue. In my own field of medicine, it can be quite difficult figuring out how do we not discriminate, but how do we make sure that people are doing work in which they can succeed and thrive? And in medicine, of course, our primary obligation is to the patient. So we can't think only about the person who's performing the job, but also like what's the impact on their patient. So there's those issues which are really difficult to sort through. And also just, people being kind of rude and dismissive and unhelpful and unkind to people with dementia and to lots of people with disabilities. I think if you speak with people who are cognitively fine but have movement disabilities and the like, it's unfortunately really common that people treat our neighbors and friends with disabilities with disrespect. And that's something that's not okay. And not because we want to be kind and generous, but because we hope to have that respect when we become disabled. So if you'd like that, you better work on making a society where you'll get the kind of treatment that you might like to have. So it's not only being generous, it's actually self-interest too, I think, that should prompt us to really work on this and make things better.
Yeah, I think so too. Um, also dementia starts to attack younger people as well, like people in their 40s or 50s. Basically, it's very important to early detect dementia as well, right?
Correct. Yeah. I will say that the vast majority of people with dementia are older. Or Alzheimer's disease and the other kind of common dementias, typically people are older. But as we get better at diagnosing, we do discover that there are people who are younger than 65 who also do have dementia, and they're at great risk for not getting a correct diagnosis because we only think of dementia in older people. So yes, that's the majority of people with dementia, but there are some people with frontotemporal dementia and other less common types of dementia that they go to doctors for years saying, help me, please figure out what's going on. And the risk of misdiagnosis or missed diagnosis is very great for younger people. So I think in terms of medical training and the awareness of the public, you make a really important point. We need to be much more aware of that somebody who's having trouble, who's 45, it's something worth checking out. This could be a form of dementia.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think education kind of at every level. I've been a medical school professor, so I've taught medical students and young physicians who are still getting training. And that's super important because working with people who already have dementia, many people, even with older age and more common forms of dementia, describe a long process of inaccurate diagnosis. So we need to do better. And most people don't get to see a specialist. They just go see their primary care physician. And a surprising number of primary care physicians either don't realize that it's dementia, or they think you shouldn't tell somebody that because there's nothing you can do about it. But I think that's very hurtful. It's very frightening to observe that you're changing and not in a good way and not know what that means. So if someone is asking you, please tell me, I don't really think as a physician you have a right to not tell them. I mean, there are rare circumstances where maybe somebody's really in distress or they've just lost their partner or they're suicidal, where you want to wait until they're in a safe situation before you would say a diagnosis that might be upsetting. Okay, if you're waiting for safety and you're figuring out what's going on. But there are still too many doctors that just think, why tell them? It'll just upset them. It's like, well, don't do that. They need to make arrangements. They need to talk to their family. And seriously, when someone's asking you, I don't understand what's happening, it's frightening. I don't see how you can justify not answering that question when you know the answer. That's what the information belongs to the patient, ultimately. It's not for the doctor to say, this is my information and I'll choose who gets to have it. It's like, it really, you do tests on their body, you examine them, that information belongs to them in the long run. So I think education, but also people in the public, as you're doing now, sort of getting us all to kind of think more broadly about cognitive impairment and when it can show up. I think that's super helpful.
Okay, so Dr. Powell, what is your advice for aging well based on your own experience?
So I am aging. I guess we're, even a newborn baby is aging, but I'm a little further along than a newborn baby now. I think really, in some ways, don't make it different. Living well is aging well. So the things that make you happy, the things that have meaning for you, still pursue them. I also think the kinds of things that make people happy, particularly as we get older, there's a lot of good work on that. That is sustained relationships. If you're lucky and you have a spouse or long-term partner, that's great. Not everybody has that. So sustain the relationships that matter with you. If you have children, it's different when they grow up and they're adults, but you can still have a really wonderful relationship with your adult children. And I think working on that and realizing how important it is and doing what you can. If, many parent-child relationships can be fraught. So it may be that there's some work that needs to be done, but they can also be so rewarding. So I'd say friendships, all of that. So personal relationships, really important. I also think we don't want to only look back as we get older. You need to have a reason to get up in the morning. You need to have something we look forward to. So try new things. people, I love to learn. I could, I could have been happy if you didn't have to work for a living. I could have been happy just being in school forever. So I try to approximate that in my life by trying to do new things, learn new things. I'm studying Spanish, which I studied in my youth, and then I spoke it okay in my 20s, and then life happened. I'm a doctor, I have kids, I'm working. I just didn't have time to use it at work after a while, and I lost track of it. So I've taken up studying that, which I think is fun for me, and it's also really good for your brain. So I like that. Um, but I would say keep growing, keep learning, do things that have meaning for you, and that will be different for each of us. It may be taking up a hobby, and it might be figuring out, you've worked presumably doing something, even if it's just in the home taking care of kids, but you probably have a lot of wisdom and experience, and it might feel really good for you to figure out how to share that with other people. So that could be volunteer work. It could be being on a board of a local community organization, or just working in a local daycare center or food pantry or whatever. But I think still feeling like you matter, like you have good work to offer, paid or otherwise, that you're learning things and that you're connected to people, and that you have fun things that you're looking forward to. This is like, oh, this day I'm going to get to go do X. It's really, if you can have some part of that every day, that's what I'd recommend. And it doesn't mean it has to be going to Hawaii. It doesn't have to be an enormously expensive thing that you're looking forward to. It could be, I arranged to call my best friend who doesn't live in the same place. I'm going to get to talk to her and hear about her grandchildren. That'll be great. So I think within your circle, I would say that's probably the most advice I have for you.
Yeah, I agree. So no matter how old you are, you still keep discovering, keep learning, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
learning and giving things to other people, being, useful to the people you know.
Yeah, being valuable to the society, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your take-home message or call of action for viewers?
Call of action. Well, I would say, returning to where our conversation started and thinking about dementia, it's true we don't have a cure for that. We have some medicines. My personal opinion, they're not that great. They don't make an enormous difference. Doesn't mean that that's not important. We have smart people working on that. But actually, what may make more of a difference is things like fitness, what you eat, staying socially active. So it really looks as if it makes a difference. It makes an impact. So, you don't have to be an Olympic athlete, and that's certainly hard to do if you're older. But do whatever you can do and try and do a little bit more of that. If you can walk, that's our first exercise in life. And throughout life, it's still absolutely one of the best. If you don't have a safe place where you can walk, maybe you can find a group of people that you could walk with, or even, sort of walk in place in your home or something if you don't have something more than that. But if you have a way to walk and you can just do that, it's a great thing for your health. It keeps you up and moving. It gets you your heart and lungs in great shape. So do that. Think about your diet. Think about, could you be a little healthier? Could you eat a little less of something that you know is kind of naughty? Doesn't mean you have to never eat it. Certainly a birthday cake on your birthday. And maybe a little more of the things that you understand to be better for you, fruits and vegetables mostly in the better for you category. We can all do a little bit more of that, a little bit less of the stuff that's not so good. But I think other than that, those would be my main take homes, I think.
Yeah. So you mean the healthy lifestyle is very important, right?
Big difference. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you feel better if you're doing it right. You shouldn't feel like, oh my God, this is too much exercise. I'm so miserable. You don't have to do it until you're, about to fall over. Just do what's appropriate for your level of fitness and where you are and your age and your wallet and everything else. Just find an easy way, that's something that you like. The exercise that you'll actually do every day is the best exercise for you.
I agree. But it's very nice of you joining us for the show today.